Anyway, yes, so tonight, well, tonight is interesting because Darren Lerigo has come to us via one of our members who sort of collared me back last summer and said, you know who you should have on is this chap called Darren Lerigo. And so we got to chatting with Darren, and so it's always lovely when somebody recommends somebody to us, because even though Noel and I have got fairly extensive address books, we don't know everybody in the world. So Darren, welcome. It's lovely to have you on. And Darren, you've got your microphone off at the moment. Darren, you there we go. Yeah, lovely. So Darren, just tell us where you're located, and then a little bit about you and what you're up to.
Will do. Well, thank you very much. So my name's Darren, and I'm currently in Chelmsford in Essex, but I'm not an Essex boy originally. I'm from Hampshire, North Hampshire originally. So when I left school 20 years ago, I started gardening, and it was on heavy clay down that way. And then 10 years ago, when I moved to Essex, I think I had to question everything I'd learned by gardening, because it's incredibly dry over here, and I think some parts are drier than Jerusalem. Some parts of Essex, there's a completely different way of kind of plants you can use and leave out over winter, and having to think about watering. So yeah. But now I'm in Essex, but I travel all over the UK working. Because my speciality, or the thing I've moved towards, is topiary and pruning, and I tend to see, when I use the word topiary, I'm talking about any time you're making a cut on a plant for an architectural effect, or to make it more beautiful, or to allow light in, rather than because you want to grow more food or do something like that. So it's yeah, I just really love that kind of practical. I love the practical nature of being outside and making these cuts, and the very physical nature of the work. But there aren't many of us making topiary. There aren't many people doing it, and yet it's such a huge part of any garden. Absolutely. So well, tonight should be interesting. I think
you're a rare breed. You're a rare breed. But also, you say that you work all over the country, but you're just about to go international as well, aren't you? So you're going to be heading over the pond to all our friends in the States quite soon, which I'm sure you can chat about in a while, so that people know where they can find you in the States. Lovely. So do you want to go into your screen share, and then we can carry on with your talk. Lovely.
Brilliant, perfect. So what I've got for you tonight, it's I've got a set of 12 provocations. What I want to do, because I tend to get asked to do the same thing again and again, and I tend to clip a lot of box balls, and I tend to make a lot of spirals and cones, and these are all brilliant things and all part of any kind of garden. They can certainly add to any garden. But as I've been making topiaries, and I do make a huge amount of I take on a lot of new work every year, whether it's renovating something or adapting it or starting from scratch, which and I get to a stage where I kind of want to share with you a number of ideas that I hope will get you thinking about how you prune your plants, and how you think about your green architecture, those evergreen plants in your garden or deciduous plants, and how you can use them to improve the view and the garden itself. So there are 12 provocations. Now, some of them I completely agree with. Some of them I'm being a little bit facetious and naughty and tongue-in-cheek. One of them, I've just realised the ex-chairman of the Boxwood and Topiary Society is on this call, and it's certainly anti-Boxwood, so I will throw that out there anyway. But what I'd like you to do is don't worry about a pen and paper or things. Is just sort of listen and enjoy what's thrown at you, and just take note of how these provocations feel as they come up. Some of them you might not care for, and some of them you might completely agree with, and that's interesting. And some of them you might think, what an absolute load of rubbish, and that's really interesting as well, because it's suggesting to you what you like when you're designing your garden, when you're working in your garden. If you're against one thing, it's going to drive you down a different avenue and change the way you garden. And I'm all for that, because there aren't enough of us making topiary and pruning, and it does tend to be the same thing. And we really need people having kind of different schools of thought or philosophies, or driving down different avenues to try and try and make topiary as modern, kind of what a modern topiary really is. So this is really for you just to enjoy and take a note of how you feel as we go through our 12 provocations. So my first provocation for you is, it's a simple one. Topiary needs simple shapes, clipped well. I'll show you this. This is a garden. This is the Jack Vert's garden, the Belgian garden designer. And I love this. It's of itself, it's very, very simple. He's working with water, he's working with stone, and he's working with evergreen plants pretty much. But what he's done is he's not only contrasted that very squared off box hedge on the right hand side with that curved one on the left, but it's been clipped very beautifully. They've not made anything weird and wonderful. They've just clipped it really, really well. And for me, when I see that lovely curved hedge dancing away down the garden, I think it's something that really draws you. It's not just the fountain that you look towards, but it's the hedge drawing you away and into the garden or down the garden. And it's really important when you might have hedges in your garden. I think it's really important that the way you cut them can actually subconsciously move people around a space. I know Luis Barrahan, the Mexican designer, he would used to, because you get very strong sunlight in Mexico, he used to have a kind of antechamber as you walked into the garden where he would put you in shade. And then as you stepped through the second door into the garden, you were hit by the sunlight. And because you went from dark to light, your emotional response is already one of, wow, this garden's amazing. And it's a really cheeky kind of quite manipulative way of gardening, but it's extraordinary because it gives you an emotional response straight away. And you can do the same thing with hedges and green architecture. Your shapes don't have to be unbelievable and different and wacky. They can be simple, but if you clip them well and with some thought, you can really guide people through a garden. This is another Jack Vert's garden. This is hornbeam, and I just think, these shapes are incredibly simple. They're just 2 jelly drops. They're done on a big scale. They're done on a big scale, but you could do this in your garden. If you have a small urban garden, you could do this as well with a hornbeam or a beech or something evergreen like bay, just a simple jelly drop shape. But he's really thought about the light coming through in the mornings and coming through those branches and that branch structure, and thinking about the light and pushing it through these simple shapes. For me, it's just an extraordinary piece of garden design because it's so simple. It's not trying to show off. And what I found is a lot of topiary is about trying to show off, look what I've made, look what I've got. It's quite a bold statement when you walk into a garden, but this is incredibly subtle and it's clipped beautifully. And so it really sort of, for me, I think it's really simple and well done. And then these at Great Dixter, as you enter, you can see how well they've been clipped. And again, there's nothing particularly fascinating about them. I think they're meant to be peacocks. I think you might suggest squirrels or ducks. I was teaching a class of children, and one of the kids said, the one on the left looks like a ballet dancer that stubbed her toe and it's swelled up in a shoe, which I just thought was wonderful. It can be anything. It's just wonky enough to kind of be anything and allow your imagination to travel. But what I love is that it's been clipped really beautifully. And so topiary in this way, it's not just something to look at, but it's incredibly tactile. The plinths that these 2 figures are on are very, very constricted, very, very narrow. But if you went past, you would definitely want to run your hands along this yew as you move down and out of the garden. And that's a lovely part about topiary. If it's clipped well, it becomes really tactile. And if you use the right plants, it can be fragrant as well. So simple plants clipped well is my first provocation. You don't need to reinvent the wheel with your shapes, just clip well. And of course, this is a little piece I did years ago for a client. These are hebes, and it was just to soften that transition from the hard landscaping onto the lawn. But they were clipped nicely, and for me, a group of blobs is called a blobbery, and I just think that's just wonderful. And I remember when Jake Hobson told me that, I think that was the moment I fell in love with with making topiary. You must have a blobbery in your garden, and it's simple. It's a really simple shape. It's just done really well and it makes a difference. Now, my second provocation for you, contrast improves the topiary. We've got back to this Jack Burt's garden, and you see the big jelly drops, the big hornbeam jelly drops in the background. But look at these scruffy grasses he's left to grow around them. If you just had the hornbeam hedges and the jelly drops, it would feel quite kind of grounded. It would feel quite static and probably quite heavy. The hornbeam can be quite a heavy topiary. But instead, you've got these quite scruffy grasses, and they just lighten, they add a different texture against these very static hedges. If you just had the grasses and you didn't have the topiaries and the hedges, they would look as if the gardener hasn't done their work. So, but together, bolting one onto the other improves both. And I love as well how he mimics that kind of lightness in the cherry blossom. So your eye is drawn upwards, not just by the topiary, but by the blossom as well. It's a really simple piece of design, and you really can do this in a small garden. One blob of hornbeam well clipped, some light grasses, and maybe something just to match that lightness. Could be Verbena bonariensis or Gower or something. Simple things done well. And you can see here the contrast, you know, what topiary really makes. We've got these very formal figures. This is in the garden of Charlotte Molesworth down in Benenden. Charlotte was my mentor. You know, I came across Charlotte maybe 10 years ago now, and she'd never let anyone clip her topiary ever before, and I came in and we got on so well. She allowed me to clip that big bird you can see in the background, and I was so nervous I took a great big chunk out of the plinth with the hedge trimmer. How I managed to do that for the first time in years to make a mistake like that, but I managed to do it, and she was wonderfully sweet about not blaming me too much for it. But we relaxed over the years, and she now lets, you know, if anyone wants to come down and practice, absolutely, you can give her a call, send her an email, and go down, and she'll work with you on the garden to do it. And we've adapted these hedges a lot. But again, we've got this contrast here, not just of the figurative and these kind of wonderful shaped, quite modern sort of hedges. They've changed again actually recently. We've cut them quite differently again in this January. But also the contrast where the frost gets onto them and where it doesn't. And you can get that by adding different planes into your hedges, and because the light reflects off differently. So you're looking for contrast all the time to improve the view. And this, I think this is an Arnie Maynard garden, and the contrast here of the beach with the evergreen yew, and how warming it is to the scene, how it really just lifts the whole vision. And I think there's something lovely about that contrast, that it's worth always thinking, actually, I've clipped my topiary well, what can I do next? Think about what you can add around it to improve it. So my third provocation for you is native deciduous trees make great topiary. I found this on a walk around Chelmsford, and I think this is just wonderful. I think this is a man who knows nothing about gardening, but had a birch tree in his front garden. And I think his wife has told him that needs to go. I mean, instead of cutting it down, he's just lopped it off at a nice height that he can reach, and then just cut it into a cube. And he's given away this wonderful bark of the birch. And in the autumn, you'll get these sort of lemony, buttery yellow leaves. I think it's an extraordinary piece of topiary, and I'm sure it's come from naivety, because it just had to be something practical. He wanted to keep the birch, and so he's cut it into a shape. And it's just lucky it's a plant that is used to being predated, and so will sprout again and come back. And this is the wonderful thing about deciduous plants, is that actually they're used to being nibbled. And so you can do all sorts with them. You know, if a cow or deer will come and eat them, then they'll grow back. And so you can do anything with them. And I would think that with the cost of some topiaries and the availability or a lack of availability of topiaries from Europe coming into the UK, actually using deciduous plants that tend to grow quicker and that fit our landscape, you know, things like hawthorn is a really beautiful plant to make into a topiary. You know, you get the blossom in May, you get the haws in September, and you get these wonderful crown of thorns in the winter, which look so good when they've constantly been cut and knitting together. They really lift off, and it might be the future, I think, or a very modern topiary is to use something deciduous because it's available and it grows well. And this is a hornbeam hedge that I was cutting. The client has a meadow beyond, which they wanted to see through to. So we began to just cut it down from this huge monster of a blob that it was. And you can see, you can get all sorts of quite wonderful kind of flexible stems in hornbeam. And then in the winter, it's semi-evergreen, so you can see through to what's there. The other thing about deciduous plants is you get this term transitions. And by that, I mean that kind of look from spring, when the leaf starts to come, into the summer, and then into the winter, and then when these go again. And I think this might be a Cleve West or something, these guys on, but I love, again, how the light comes through and you get that movement, those transitions from season to season to season. There's something really lovely about deciduous topiaries and hedges because they offer that. Provocation number 4 for you all. Boxwood should be used sparingly. Now, I love boxwood. It's a classic topiary plant for a reason, because you get this lovely reflective leaf. And it has a very small leaf, so you can create all sorts of shapes with it. You know, a bigger leaf, something like Bay or Eleagnus, you're kind of always going to have to do cylinders or something quite full, and cubes or things like that. But small leaf means you can do different shapes. But we have problems. The boxwood caterpillar being one, and if we've had a lot of people in snow at the moment in the UK, but actually once it gets to kind of 15 degrees on a few days, a regular basis, the boxwood caterpillar begins to munch the boxwood leaves, and you've got to be out there. There's no natural predator for it, so you've got to be out there just squashing or spraying or however you want to get rid of them. You can also go to a place called the Green Gardener, which does a year-long moth lure, a pheromone trap, which will last all season. And they're about 20 quid maybe, but they're really useful to have as a kind of second way of attacking the caterpillar, because if you can trap the male moths, they're not going to fertilize the eggs, and so you reduce the work you have to do. For those of you in the US, I think the boxwood caterpillar may well have just arrived. Without wanting to ruin your evening by telling you that, but I'll get that confirmed, and I'll be able to confirm that. But it's a nightmare. You know, the first lockdown here, I'd spent 7 years on this huge kind of boxwood, turned it into a kind of Dr. Seuss tree in North London, and within a week it was devastated because the client couldn't get home with everything had locked down, and so she wasn't there, and just completely. Yeah, devastated. 7 years of work. Always nice. If you're going to replace your boxwood, then you can start with Lonicera nitida, which is known as poor man's box, and you can see it looks quite smart. It clips quite well. It tends to be a little bit used by, you know, Tesco's car park, a supermarket car park plant, because it does grow so quickly and so well. But it's poor man's boxwood because you can just tear off a piece of the leaf, a stem, and just pop it in the ground, and in 2 years you will have a short hedge. So it's really useful if you want to fill in some gaps or just have a sort of throwaway hedge somewhere that you need a boundary. The one problem with Lonicera is that it will grow so fast. You might have to cut it 3 times a year, whereas boxwood is a slow grower. It's there for a long time, so you only have to cut once a year if you cut later in the year. So I don't tend to recommend Lonicera nitida as a replacement for boxwood because of that amount of work that you're adding. There's no need to have that much work. Gardening shouldn't be overwhelming. You should be enjoying your garden, you know. Get a glass of wine and just sit and watch. I put this one in, Teucrium fruticans. The Teucriums are interesting. I particularly like this one, fruticans, but I think partly because of the word fruticans. I just think that's wonderful, which means sort of small shrub. But if I was going to replace boxwood, I would look at this, partly because you won't get that lovely formality boxwood can give you. It's too scraggly for that. It's too kind of all over the place. It's like a teenager whose arms are still growing and legs, and it hasn't quite worked out where its body is since puberty hit. But it has these lovely reflective leaf, silver leaf, And you've got these wonderful flowers, which the bees love. So I'm willing to trade off that nice formality for something like that. I feel that's a very modern idea, that you're providing a source of nectar for the honeybee. This is Ilex crenata, which some of you may know. I've called this the fussy one because it seems to never quite thrive, or if it does thrive, it thrives for a while and then it kind of starts to look a bit weird. And I've always struggled with it, and it's quite brittle when you're cutting. It's not very nice to cut, and it's quite expensive as well. You know, it's not, so although it looks like a box, it has a lovely small leaf, I find it quite, I dislike it. That's what I'm going to just say. I just dislike it. It's as simple as that. It's an instinctual thing. It doesn't cut well, and I find it a bit fussy. So for me, it's not a great replacement for box if I'm looking for something like that. And the same with euonymus, green spire or green rocket, it might be known as. Its nature. Green spire, green rocket, it wants to go up and straight, whereas we're trying to use it as a hedge and kind of cutting it low and horizontal. And it's kind of like boxing in a child. You know, you might have, your child might be a little bit sort of all over the place and love space and the planets, but you want them to be a barrister and very kind of logical, and it's just not them. You know, and I think you can't do that with a child. So why are you doing that with a plant? I'm really, oh, is my internet all right, Annie? Is that?
Yeah, no, you're okay. You froze for a little bit, but it seems okay now. Yeah.
Brilliant, perfect, good. So yeah, if it comes, just let me know. I think we'll be all right. But for me, I like plants. I'm not looking to sort of squash plants into a, for someone who makes topiary, which is about dominating plants and shaping plants in a way that you want, I'm not kind of up for that. I kind of want to take the character of the plant and allow that to express itself. So I don't tend to use euonymus, green spire or green rocket to replace boxwood. If you need a low hedge and you've got a sunny spot, then why not lavender or rosemary? You know, Miss Jessop's upright clips very beautifully, and you can make it to a lovely hedge. You know, it doesn't have to be an evergreen, and it doesn't have to be a kind of something traditional. You can look at what suits the soil, and lavender is a wonderful plant, simple plant to use. My fifth provocation is topiary is a commitment to time, and it seems to be completely anathema to modern living, I would suggest, where we tend to want things now. I've been working at Bennington Lordship over the last year and a half, and you can see these wonderful ruins, and they've been kind of covered by this yew hedge. And so I was asked to expose the ruins again. And we've got this old yew hedge, been there a long time. And this is what I provided for the client. And you don't see this on Instagram. I've never seen anyone who makes topiary show this kind of stuff. And it gives a false impression of what topiary is like. You have to commit. If you want to make some topiary or a hedge, you're committing to something for a long time. And this is what I gave the client by the end of the, you know, an hour after we started with this, and an hour later you have this. And people think, well, does this guy know what he's doing? But I'm committing to a process that's going to come every year, the pruning, to make something beautiful. And by the autumn, we have this new regrowth because we got the sunshine, we let the sun in, and we managed to find this. You're committing to something when you're making topiary. My sixth provocation is topiary should not be designed, but made in the moment. Now, this is a piece of, this is a large boxwood that I made into this very curvy kind of, almost like a Henry Moore kind of style. And what I did is I just wanted to reduce its weight and give the client something that felt quite soft. Now, I did this a couple of years ago. This was three years ago, I think. And it wasn't thought about, it was just I wanted something soft with what I had. During the first lockdown, I went down in June, I think it was sort of the end of that 2020 June, and I made this from the same plant. And it's almost like a fist of frustration. And it was again made in the moment based on what I'd done the year before. And it was only when I took a photo and looked later on that I realized that that moment was driven by emotion. I was obviously in a very happy, nice place, 1 June. And at the end of that first lockdown, I was obviously in a different place. There was obviously a capturing of the mood. And I think that's interesting. I think topiary can be made in the moment, and it will, when you've got that much material to work with, following what you feel can do something quite extraordinary. And when I clipped it last year, it's gone back to that more curvy, kind of relaxed and quite fluid topiary. The other thing you can do is seek friction when you're designing. This was an old Gertrude Jekyll garden, and it was a big yew hedge that's been hugely dominating and refusing to let any light into the garden. So we were seeking friction, and what we found was they wanted to allow light into the garden, but they also didn't want everyone to see into the garden. And so it was a case of just stripping out huge amounts of branches to create a kind of cloud pruning. It's only a year in, so it looks pretty ropey, but in 5, 6, 7 years, it's going to be something quite extraordinary with these wonderful scallops of yew going along. But it will do what it needs to do. It will allow for privacy for the client, but let the light in and take away that claustrophobic darkness of the yew hedge. So we were seeking friction in our design to allow us to decide what the shape had to be. I think this is absolutely true. Women design better topiary than men. I find men tend to give me this kind of design done on pencil on the back of an envelope. And it doesn't matter how often I see it. I will say to the gentleman in question, are you sure this is what you want next to your front door? Are you sure this is the message you want to let someone know as they come down your driveway? And every time they say yes. If you're a woman on this Zoom talk and you are laughing and the man next to you isn't, perhaps explain why in your own time, all right? And I'll leave that one there, I think. Provocation number 8. Topiary needs movement. Topiary can be incredibly static. But this is a Luciano Jubilee garden on the border of Sussex, Kent, that I work on, and you can see it's quite heavy. You've got yew and boxwood, but because you've got that lovely movement of the box hedge around the water, around the pond, and you've got that lovely round driveway, and it's just being mimicked by the curves of the hedges. I think there's something lovely about adding movement to your hedges. And we've actually gone further in the last few years and begun to just slope things and create a kind of almost like we're funneling, like a pinball machine, funneling the clients when they drive in, funneling them towards the front door, which you can do just by the way you cut things very subtly. Provocation 9. Your cultural vitamins are important. Now, I studied with this phrase, cultural vitamins, I came across 20 odd years ago. I studied with the lady called Annie Castledine, who was a theatre director. And she was fiercely intellectual and strong and insane and wonderful. And she would always ask, what are your cultural vitamins? Why do I need to listen to you if you haven't thought about the world or come across the world? And it was frightening as an 18-year-old to have this sort of attitude. She passed away on the same day as Muhammad Ali, and her obituary in the Times began, if Annie was to meet Muhammad Ali at the pearly gates, I wouldn't fancy his chances. Which I just think it was a frightening person to work with for years, but anyone who came across her kind of walked away with this need to think more about what they're doing. You know, even if you're wrong, have the balls to commit to something and take responsibility and have thought it through. And it left me with this idea of cultural vitamins are important. And what I find with topiary is that most people just want Alice in Wonderland. We're kind of stuck in this formal Edwardianism or this tweeness. And actually topiary isn't twee. It can be immensely modern and thrilling. And why could we not have, you know, if you work as a lawyer or something, perhaps you're always looking for a loophole in the law. So perhaps that's your cultural vitamin. In order to make your hedge, you're looking for loopholes where you can half see through things. You know, you can use anything that you like to drive the design of your garden. Your cultural vitamins drive what you're going to make and how you're going to make your garden. And I think it's so important. Chris and I from the European Boxwood and Topiary Society, we did some teaching at Capel Manor with a lot of people who were new to gardening. They were studying it for a few months. And you can see on this photo, about 3 from the right-hand side, there is what the young lad called a golden snitch from Harry Potter. That was his cultural vitamins. And so he made something. He was totally unbiased when it came to designing topiary, but he loved Harry Potter. And so he came up with this wonderful design from a little lemon cypress, and he did it in 20 minutes. I thought it was extraordinary. And I like that. It came from a slightly naive place. I think there's something wonderful about tapping in to what makes you laugh and what you like and bringing it to your garden, adding it to your garden. Provocation number 10 of 12, we're nearly there. Organic topiary suits modern life. Now, organic topiary is where you look at the plant and the plant tells you what it wants to be. You're not dominating or deciding what it is going to be. I lived in Madrid for a year, about 12, 13 years ago, and this is in Retiro Park in the center of Madrid. And it's wonderful. Someone's obviously looked at these cypresses, and perhaps as they've started to die, they've just cut away the dead. And instead of taking it out, they've just followed what the plant wanted to be to create these extraordinary broccoli trees. If you wanted to meet anyone in Retiro Park, you would either say, can we meet by the old tiger pit, or can we meet by the broccoli trees? It brings people to the garden. You know, gardening is such an individual act. You do it yourself, you're alone in the garden. But gardens themselves are communal places. They bring people together. And absolutely, this is just because it's been cut and they followed the plant, they've brought so many people to this part of the garden. And I don't know if you look closely, you can see other topiaries, cones of boxwood all around it. And I always think they look so dull in comparison to this very characterful and wonderful piece that's been made. And it's not just on a big scale. You can do it with your house plants as well. Just follow what the Ionium decides. This I came back from work, and it was sort of at the end of that first lockdown, and my wife had made this from the Ionium, and I thought it was extraordinary. It was absolutely extraordinary, because she's just followed kind of what the plant told her, and she just stripped it of leaves and showed off its wonderful stem. My 11th of 12 provocations. Maintaining topiary is easy? I think it is. If you get the right time later in the year when things aren't growing, when they're stopping or slowing down, then you can cut them and they can look really sharp and smart for 6 months or so. But this is Grannock House, Arnie Maynard's first garden, and I was called in to cut these last year before, because they got out of shape. And they're huge, these pieces. They're really, really big. They're amazing. They create wonderful shadows, but they are too big. I really suggest, if you want to make a decent topiary, make it simple. Reduce the size, do it where you're comfortable. I clipped one piece that's 120 feet high, so that's about 18 meters high. It requires basically 3 days on a cherry picker, and it's huge, and it's over a lake, and it's incredibly difficult. It's extraordinary. But if you want to make your topiary life easy, make your topiary smaller. 8 feet is enough, 10 feet is enough, and keep them simple. You can see here, this is one from 1904. This was from a Dutch garden that was brought over to a place in Somerset. And you can see here, is it simple? It's probably about the right height to make a statement, but it's built, the shapes are built. You've got a kind of droid, a 2-piece droid at the bottom. Then you've got 2 rings, 2 donuts. Then you've got 3 mop heads on top of that, then another donut, and then a final kind of triangle or a pyramid on the top. You've got to cut that at least from 2 sides, and you've got to shape it so that it looks smart all the way down. If you like clipping and you've got time, it's really easy. But to be honest, it's probably a lot of work having to make that look really smart, because you've got to stand back and make sure it's all matching up. So simplify it down. Parterres, this is Lotha Castle, and this is a yew parterre, a Taxus parterre. I think parterres they're incredibly difficult to cut because the strain on your body, because it's a certain height, it's really difficult. What I would like to see for a modern topiary garden is an echo of a parterre. You have your parterre, but you remove pieces so that people, almost like a Tetris game that hasn't gone very well, they're having to fill in the moments of where the parterre is. For me, parterres were fine when you had 30 staff to cut them. When you've just got one, me, it's difficult. It's really hard work, as beautiful as they look. So echo your parterre if you want to make it very modern. And my final provocation for tonight is that topiary combats climate change. If you were to put in a topiary, you're not going to disturb that soil after it's put in. So you're going to be able to lock carbon in the soil. If you cut once a year or once every other year, and you don't burn the arisings, you can put them into a long-term heap, you're capturing that carbon in the soil. If you're taking cuttings of your boxwood rather than buying in and bringing them in and transporting them, then you're not spending, you're not burning fuel. I think it's a really good way of combating climate change if done well. And I hope that's the end of my presentation, my talk. I hope this has provoked a few people. And
fantastic. Thank you, Darren.
That's really interesting. I particularly appreciate the sort of, taking a modernist angle. It's so often people just think topiary, tradition, and the kind of tyranny of the classical, perpendicular geometry. And you can talk to, there's a couple, I was thinking of that James Van Sweden in the United States, the late James Van Sweden, a terrifically influential landscape architect. You could not have a serious conversation with him about any kind of clipping. You'd go into a kind of paroxysm, I suppose, because of the kind of horrendous sort of meatball pruning you see. But it's some innovative topiary is really, really inspiring. And there could be so much more of it if people could just kind of, as you say, get provoked onto another track.
I'll be interested to see what has provoked and what hasn't. Yes. I've done something similar to this a few times, and it's some people pick it up and some are absolutely against, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. You go down the avenue, but be bold enough to go down it. Absolutely.
Darren, it's worth pointing out for people who've not been to Charlotte Molesworth's garden, that garden, when Charlotte and Donald got married, they asked for cuttings for Boxwood for their wedding present. So that garden is made from wedding present cuttings.
Yeah.
And I think when you go there, you're blown away by the creativity and the craziness of it. But then when they tell this story that everything is grown from a wedding present cutting, it just is so magical, isn't it? It's just, she's an extraordinary woman, isn't she?
There's some there. Yeah, no, absolutely. She's brilliant, and it was her. She followed what she liked.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
She's a frenetic personality, but she's graceful as well. And
yes,
you see that absolutely in the hedges. She's got yew tied into limes, tied into holly, tied into hornbeam, because that's what they had. The friction was they had no money to build, to plant and to cultivate.
Yeah, just wonderful. I'm just praying that Boxwood caterpillar doesn't discover her. I just wanted to ask you, Darren, with something like Lonicera pileata, if you were going to use that for topiary, because it's fairly sort of open, would you plant it more densely in the first instance to create more of a sort of dense shrub, because it does have a much more open habit than box, doesn't it? So would you ever compensate? I mean, I know you finished up by saying you wouldn't necessarily think it's a great alternative to box, but
I have used it with some clients when we needed to, and we've just gone up the road and plucked it out of another garden and brought the we did ask.
Yeah.
Just hedge trimmed their shrub down and took it away, and put it in. And I pretty much did it the same as box, planting the same. And I didn't worry too much. You know,
you didn't go a little closer together. Okay. And
no,
I don't.
if you get gaps, you can use a bit of string to tie things in. You know, no one's got to see.
Have you ever been to Marjorie Fish's garden in Somerset, East Lambrook Manor? Well, they've changed it slightly, but when you come out of what was the exit of Marjorie Fish's garden, you're facing a row of what would have been council houses, and in the front garden of one of those houses, I wish I had I will send you the picture, is the most extraordinary creature. It's a sort of, I think it's a kangaroo cross squirrel, and it makes me laugh every time I see it, because my mother used to live in the next village, because I'm surprised that some young youth hasn't come along and clipped the tail off. But also, I used to drive past it rather sniffily, thinking, oh, you know, how ridiculous is that? And then suddenly, one spring, I drove past it and I realised it was hawthorn. I always assumed it was something like Lanissa or even box, but it was actually hawthorn. So one spring it was covered in white flowers and it was just spectacular. I mean, completely bonkers, but spectacular.
Yeah. Really, I think topiary does bring out that kind of side of you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I know we were talking about this last time we had a chat, that Wisley, for those of you that are on this side of the pond, Wisley has got a very good garden now with alternatives to box that's absolutely jam-packed with, you know, mostly evergreen, not exclusively, but it's really useful. I mean, it's all labeled, which is very handy anyway, but there's lots and lots of interesting different cultivars, you know, more compact taxus and things like that, which make really good topiary. So if anyone hasn't seen this at Wisley, I do recommend going and having a look, because it really does make you think about the other alternatives, you know, and if you're worried about the old caterpillar.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got there's a message actually from Chris at the Boxwood Society. The caterpillar is in 7 states of the US and Canada.
Oh,
so we're not going to tell you which ones. We're just going to let you worry. I'm sure if you email, you can find out, and it'll be on a website with the American Boxwood Society. So
Rachel's asking which can you remember which Hebe made up your blobbery?
That's Rachel, what a good question. I actually can't, but I'm sure it's just one you would pick up if you went to Wyvale or home. You could pick up very simply. It's quite a small leaf. I think there is a Hebe topiaria.
There is. Yes, it's got a lovely rounded shape, hasn't it?
But no, sorry, Rachel, I don't. But you will see it everywhere. It's just it's a real common one. It's just in the time spent clipping it.
Yeah. Wendy wants to know: do you trim only once a year or once a season? What's your sort of?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I try to trim just once a year because it's just a huge amount of work and I've got a lot to get through. So I'll tend to do it later in the year. But then there's one job which I trim 8 times a year. It's a Boxwood down in Sonning, but they do a lot of the BBC does a lot of filming there. So it's got to look absolutely perfect all the time. And I'm sure the Boxwood hates me when it sees me get out of the car with a pair of shears. I think it just thinks, oh, this guy again, let me grow, let me be. So it's really about, again, it comes back to your personality or your character. Topiary really does bring out, I've seen people who are very kind of logical and straight-laced, and a box, you know, everything needs to be in a box. And yet when they make topiary, they'll make something very fluid, because it's obviously it's almost a break from their character, a break from what's normally running through
a bit of a release.
So I encourage you kind of not to worry too much, Wendy, about when to clip, but think, well, do I like something that looks a little bit shaggier, or do I have the time? You know, that's it. I worked in big gardens. Sometimes time just isn't the option.
Lisa Scott says she's just up the road from you in Colchester. Do you like box and other topiary when it's in its shaggy stage, or does that really annoy you?
No, Lisa, I do. I love it in the shaggy stage, because I like the contraction later in the year, when it's sort of, when you look at it in late August and you think, it's a lot. Everything's a bit of a mess, and then you cut it and it's clean and it's sharp, and it's I love that contraction. And it goes back to having, we spoke at the start about that emotional feel. The way you prune will change your feeling as you go through the garden. It's the same when you prune will do that, and suddenly it lightens everything as you go into autumn. And I think there's something really lovely. That word contraction is really important to me. You're looking for that sharpening up, and when you do it is part of your design. Absolutely.
And Anne saying, hello Darren, I'm about to put a very inorganic shaped knot garden in front of my employer's house. We've decided to use you instead of box. I have some anxiety because we're going to clip it low in some parts. Have we made the right choice?
Yes, it's my the issue is mine. It's my personality. When I say I don't like you, I like you to be a little bit bigger if it's kept. When we talk low, I like it to be about 3.5 feet lowest, only because it wants to be a tree. And I just have, my feeling is I like it to kind of to have its character, to begin to develop its character. But absolutely, if you keep you cut, and maybe, you know, it does work. It does work. You know,
and I would add to that Anne, in the Wisley garden that I was talking about, they have got a couple of different varieties of taxus that are quite low and compact growing. So I know I've got a photograph of it, and I'm very happy to go back and look at which variety it was. But also at Blarney Castle, they've used a more of a horizontal yew around the sort of mound at the base of the castle, and it's lovely because it kind of goes that way. It doesn't necessarily want to go that way. So it's probably about choosing the right variety as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I work on I can't show you some of the photos. I don't know if, no, I can't show them because of the climate, but we've used some golden yew, and so you get that sort of lovely flick of the new growth, lovely and bright, but the green gorgeous, underneath is different. And then I've scarred into it, and so you actually get kind of the darkness where it's been scarred, and then the normal kind of green, and then the lightness, and you've got the 3 layers as it goes around these big topiaries, and it's wonderful. You know, it's really interesting, and it cuts down on some of the cutting because that fluffiness, you know, is allowed to be. So you can do all sorts of experimenting. It's you know, and I just think it needs really think about how you're pruning.
Lateral thinking, Joan, who's over in Canada, says, what a fabulous and fun presentation. I have several boxwoods, very healthy, she says, and I'm going to give it a go and have fun and be creative. So watch out, everybody in Vancouver. Just brace yourselves.
Chaos,
Anne is saying maybe that Hebe was Racaensis, possibly.
That could well.
It's nice and tight, isn't it? And Amanda's saying, wonderful presentation, totally brilliant. Can you use rosemary for topiary, please?
Absolutely, Amanda. Rosemary, you can. You've got to be aware, because it's not something that will grow back if you cut too hard, if you cut into the brown wood. You know, that's why the classic topiary plants are ones that come back from, that re-sprout. You know, they're sprouters, not seeders. But rosemary, absolutely, if you're careful, rosemary is really nice to use, and you get the fragrance. You know, it's wonderful. Really
and Adam saying, thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise. Wonderful presentation, Darren. Thank you, Annie and Noel, for hosting. Well, our pleasure. It's lovely to share with you. Wendy's saying thank you very much, and then Anna's saying, what about thuyer? What's your thought on thuyer as a material?
Yeah, Anna, that's a great question. A lot of conifers clip beautifully, and actually better than a lot of the things are less work to clip. Things like boxwood, which you might have to go over 2, 3, 4 times to really look good. But it's not something that I tend to put in, although I've clipped a juniper that was on a bank, and just kind of created this kind of almost like an archway, removed everything at the bottom, and just allowed these things, put them into sort of big dinner plates. And again, you just have to be careful with it, because with the conifers, because they you know, if you clip too hard, you leave a big hole. which you can get around with a bit of string. You can pull branches through.
Yes,
it's not the end of the world. No one needs to see the bit of string.
And be creative. And I was interested that you brought up the gender issue, because that was really interesting. So the fact that you, in your opinion, you think women are better topiarists than men. However, in terms of quantity, do you think more men topiarize than women? Do you think it's a male thing? Do you think it's more of a male gardening pastime?
Not now, not that I see. Not that I see. The people
that's
who,
it's good to know now. Yeah.
I think, I would think middle class white male definitely originally, but I would suggest, and I'm the perfect example of this. But I would suggest that more women email me and ask, this is what I want to bring to the garden.
Oh, right.
And I would suggest that really, maybe it's, as in many things, it's about having the confidence to do it, and kind of the, I grew up with very strong women, and I was taught by Annie when I was 18, who was a very strong woman. So I was used to people with that coming out and saying, this is what I want. And I think, but my job always is to let people to try and draw out what they like about gardening and what's their character. I don't go in and say, right, we're having this, this and this. It's my job to say, this is what the plants are doing, this is what the budget is, where's the friction, what are we going to make? Molesworth's garden is a very strong character, and she based on the friction, and I think that's I think there are more women doing topiary, more women come on the courses and are better at designing. So talking about courses, you are heading over the Atlantic Ocean quite soon, aren't you, to teach in the States? Do you want to just give everybody a little taste or a little teaser of where you're going to be? Yep, so I'm going to be at the Meadow Conservancy in the Hamptons. So if you are in the US and we're going to be doing a seminar via Zoom on World Topiary Day, which is Thursday, May the 12th, which you can join from anywhere. And that will be a bit about topiary composition and things. And then on the Friday and Saturday, the 13th and 14th, I should be teaching a couple of workshops where we will be making a mess at Meadow, basically. Alejandro, the head gardener, said to me, please be gentle on our shrubs and hedges. I can't promise that, really.
It's a nice garden. That's an unusual, it's a nice garden. It's an unusual one, that you'll like it.
Right. Good. So I would love, but if anyone can join in, or if you know people in the US, I would love, because it's the first time I've been to New York. It'd be great if you can come over and it's World Topiary Day. Let's share these ideas and make something, see what we can share, skills and thoughts on how topiary and pruning affects the garden.
Well, lovely. How wonderful. How exciting. And your website is modernmint.co.uk, isn't it? So if people want to approach and contact you, it's modern mint, as in the herb, .co.uk.
So if for those in the US, at the start of the pandemic, a company in the US took the name Modern Mint, and they sell garden tools that are absolutely tut. But they take your money and they don't send you the things. So during the start of the pandemic, I was hearing your auntie has just caught COVID and passed away. And also here's 20 messages, people demanding their money back. I'm a gardener in London, near London. And it still happens 2 years on. And
my goodness.
I spoke to the fraud police in the UK, and they said, as long as they're not linking to you, there's nothing we could do. So if you Google Modern Mint in the US, it says it's a spam, and it's
oh my goodness. They've got to Google your name.
Modern UK is me, and I've got nothing to do with it. So please forgive that. And
Darren, what's the origin of your name? Is it Spanish, or where is it from?
No, my dad's a North Yorkshireman. So.
Really, Lerigo. So when we showed the picture of Madrid, I thought perhaps you were.
No, I think it could be Italian, maybe Lerigo. But my father he's so far north. He thought Sheffield was the south growing up. He's grew up on the moors near Barningham, which I think, or Barnard Castle, which I think everyone now knows. So.
Yeah, you certainly do. Yeah.
so no, not maybe just a European sensibility. Maybe.
Yeah, no, lovely. Well, Darren, it's been fantastic, and thank you so much for putting that together and provoking the thought. I mean, it is about sort of thinking outside the box, literally, isn't it? And yeah,
but yeah, what a great title.
That was great. Thank you.
Yeah, and for those people who are new to us tonight, I'm sure lots of new names. Every Thursday night at 6 o'clock. We might push it to 7 o'clock because of the summer evenings, but we'll let you know. We have a different guest every week, and do explore the website because there's lots to explore.
A lot on there. There's a lot
on there, and also lots of lovely live events. And in fact, Darren and I are cooking up a little idea. Hopefully for the end of this year for members in the UK. Ooh. And so we're working on a little idea for members, a visit. It might be to a garden that you've seen tonight on his presentation, but we've got lots to sort out yet. So we'll keep you posted, won't we? Anyway, thank you so much, Darren. It's been fabulous. And have a good spring of clipping. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Bye.